His hand slid lower under the blanket, fingers brushing the waistband of my briefs. And even though we hadn't said a word in minutes, I knew exactly what he was about to do, and that I wasn't going to stop him. Not after the way he'd looked at me before the lights went out. Not after the way our legs kept finding each other in the dark. This wasn't part of the plan, but nothing about tonight had gone the way it was supposed to. I was supposed to be alone, and I definitely wasn't supposed to be in bed with my Airbnb host. It had started as a simple trip, a weekend getaway to Vermont for a much-needed reset. I'd been running too hard for too long, city noise, deadlines, failed dates, the usual. And a friend had recommended this little mountain town with a name I couldn't pronounce and streets that looked like a Christmas movie set. The Airbnb listing was called Wooded Bliss, Rustic Cabin Retreat. It had rave reviews, a fire pit, and a photo of a big cozy bed with flannel sheets. Perfect for solitude. I booked it 3 weeks in advance, set the reminders, packed my weekend bag with just enough cold weather layers and one indulgent bottle of red wine. Hey, if you're here and feeling the vibe already, hit like, drop a comment, and subscribe to support these stories and help more people find them. It means the world, and it keeps us going. I arrived in the dark around 9:45 p.m., chilled and tired and fully expecting a key in a lockbox and a quiet evening to myself. But when I pulled up the gravel driveway, the porch lights were on, and the front door was open. A man stepped out as I climbed from the car, and for a split second I thought I had the wrong house. He was tall, maybe 6 feet 2 inches, with thick dark hair pulled into a loose bun, flannel shirt unbuttoned at the collar, sleeves rolled halfway up his forearms. He looked like someone who split logs for fun and smelled like cedar and warm spice. "Can I help you?" he asked, voice calm but guarded. Yeah, I said, half laughing, half freezing. "I booked the cabin for the weekend?" He furrowed his brow. "What's your name?" "Julian." He blinked. "Julian, you're early." "What?" He pulled his phone out, tapped a few times, then turned it toward me. "My booking. Next weekend." "Oh my God," I said, blinking at the date. "You've got to be kidding me." "You're not kidding?" he asked. "Number I swear. I thought it was this weekend." He rubbed a hand across his jaw, visibly weighing something. "Well, that's unfortunate." "I can find a motel or something nearby," I said quickly, already reaching for my phone. "I feel awful. I should have double-checked." He looked up at the sky, the cold wind ruffling his shirt slightly. "Nearest place is about 40 minutes. Maybe more, this late." I hesitated. He sighed. "You hungry?" he asked suddenly. I blinked. "What?" He smiled, just barely. "You look hungry. Come in. We'll figure it out after you eat." The inside of the cabin was warm and full of low amber light. It smelled like roasted garlic and pine wood. A soup pot simmered on the stove. There was music playing somewhere in the background. Soft jazz. Something brushed and slow. He introduced himself as Wes. I learned he owned the cabin, lived there full-time, and only rented it when he felt like having company or needed a break from solitude. He made us each a bowl of stew, thick with potatoes, tender beef, rosemary, something smoky, and poured 2 glasses of wine from a bottle already open. "I wasn't expecting a guest," he said with a quiet smile. "But you don't seem like trouble." "I try not to be," I said, laughing nervously, though tonight might suggest otherwise. After dinner, he showed me the bedroom, the only one. "It's yours," he said. "I'll take the couch." I looked at the long, worn leather sofa near the fireplace. "That can't be comfortable." "It's not," he said, smirking, "but I've survived worse." I stood there awkwardly for a beat. "We can share, if that's not weird." His eyes lingered on mine longer than they needed to. "You sure?" "It's a big bed." He nodded slowly. "All right." We brushed our teeth side by side in the bathroom, the way strangers do when they're both pretending this isn't strange. He stripped down to boxers and a thermal shirt. I wore briefs and a long-sleeved tee. We got in from opposite sides, pulled the covers up, and lay there in the dark, pretending to scroll through our phones. And then our feet touched. Accidentally at first, then deliberately. A brush of toes, a shift of a knee, the breath between us growing heavier. I glanced at him. His eyes were already on me. His hand reached under the blanket, fingers grazing my stomach. And just like that, the bed was no longer big enough to keep us apart. The moment Wes's fingers slid across my stomach under the blanket, something in the air thickened. The kind of quiet that doesn't feel empty, but loaded. I didn't move, didn't breathe too deep. I just let his hand rest there, warm and steady, right above the edge of my briefs. "You okay with this?" he asked, voice soft and low in the dark. "Yeah," I whispered, heart hammering hard enough to echo in my ears. "Are you?" "I wouldn't have reached for you if I wasn't." His fingers moved again, gently this time. Not bold, not groping, just curious. They traced small circles across my lower stomach, dipping slightly with each pass, like he was checking if I'd stop him. I didn't. Instead, I slid a little closer. Our knees brushed, his thigh pressed against mine. I could feel the heat of his body now, radiating through the sheets, through the thick air between us, through the question neither of us dared to speak. Wes turned toward me fully, shifting, so his chest faced mine beneath the covers. His hand stayed at my waist, now cupping the side of my hip, thumb resting on the dip just above the curve. "I was trying not to look at you all night," he said softly, trying to be polite. I smiled in the dark. "You weren't subtle." He laughed, a breath more than a sound. "Guess I'm rusty." And then, before either of us said another word, his mouth met mine. It wasn't rushed. It wasn't even hungry, not yet. It was slow, open, exploratory, the kind of kiss that asks permission and gives you time to answer with your lips instead of words. His beard tickled just enough, and his breath tasted faintly of the wine we'd shared. My hand moved to his chest, feeling the solid warmth of him beneath the fabric. He groaned softly when I kissed him back, with more pressure. That low sound in his throat went straight through me. He rolled slightly on top, one leg slipping between mine, and I arched into him without meaning to. Our bodies aligning naturally, too easily. His hand slid lower again, grazing the waistband of my underwear. He paused. "You sure?" he asked again. Instead of answering, I pulled his shirt up and over his head, fingers grazing the soft hair on his chest, then down along the taper of his torso. He took that as the answer it was. His hand slipped beneath the waistband this time, and I gasped as his fingers found me. He stroked me slow, gentle, purposeful. My hips responded before I could even think, pressing upward, breath-catching. My hand slid into the back of his briefs, gripping the curve of his ass, pulling him closer. "God, you feel good," he murmured against my throat. "So do you." We moved together beneath the sheets, touching, kissing, exploring each other's bodies like a slow burn waiting to catch flame. The tension had been simmering since the moment we'd stood awkwardly in the kitchen hours ago, and now it was rolling through every inch of skin, every arch of breath, every murmur passed between lips. It didn't go further than that. Not yet. But when we finally lay back, breathless and tangled, with his arm around my chest and my head on his shoulder, it didn't feel unfinished. It felt inevitable. "I didn't expect tonight to go like this," I said quietly. Wes kissed the top of my head. "Neither did I." We didn't talk after that. We just stayed still, skin against skin, the warmth between us enough to chase off the mountain cold bleeding in through the windows. And when I finally drifted off, I felt his hand on my waist, not reaching, not asking, just there, like it had always belonged. I woke to the faint sound of birds and the smell of wood smoke and rain in the air. Soft gray light pouring in through the window and casting a pale glow across the bed. For a moment I didn't move. I just lay there, face buried in a warm pillow, completely relaxed. And then I remembered where I was and who was behind me. West, his arm was still around my waist, not draped lazily, but holding me. His body pressed against mine from behind, chest to back, his breath slow and steady on the back of my neck. I wasn't just in his bed. I was in his arms. I shifted slightly, and his hand moved in response, tightening around my stomach. I felt him stir behind me, hips pressing forward, just enough for me to feel him hard against the curve of my lower back. Neither of us spoke. His hand slid slowly across my stomach, then lower. Not all the way, not yet. Just hovering near where he'd touched me last night. The contact was soft, patient, but deliberate. I exhaled slowly, pushing back against him just enough to let him know, "Yes, you're still here," he whispered, voice thick with sleep. "I didn't want to leave." "Good," he murmured, nose nuzzling against the side of my neck. "Because I don't want you to." We stayed like that, not moving much, just slowly rocking, hips lined, his hand exploring again beneath the blanket. The pace was unhurried, the energy softer than the night before. Still electric, but gentler, more connected. His lips brushed my shoulder. "Let me take care of you this morning." I nodded, breath catching. And for the next few minutes, he did. With his mouth, his hands, his body pressed close to mine as I trembled in his hold. Afterward, we lay there in silence, chest to chest, his fingers tracing lazy circles into my skin. I should have felt strange. I should have felt like a guest who'd overstayed his welcome. Instead, I felt like I belonged. And that scared me more than anything. After breakfast, which Wes made shirtless in worn pajama pants while humming a tune I didn't recognize, we sat at the little wooden table by the window, each with a mug of coffee, watching the rain tap against the glass. I was still wearing his flannel, unbuttoned over my tee from last night. He hadn't asked for it back, and I hadn't offered. We hadn't said much since what happened in bed that morning, but it wasn't awkward. It felt like pause like the moment after a song ends, but the echo is still there. "So," Wes finally said, stirring sugar into his cup, "what's your plan now?" I looked up, heartbeat stuttering. "You mean today?" He nodded, expression neutral but unreadable. "I guess I'll find a hotel for the rest of the weekend. I still want to stay in town." Wes didn't respond right away. He sipped his coffee, eyes watching the tree line through the window. "You don't have to go." I blinked. What?" He finally looked at me. "I said you don't have to go. The place is still open for another week. No one booked after you. Well, after the real date." I studied his face. He wasn't joking. He wasn't teasing. His eyes were soft, almost cautious. "You're serious?" He nodded. "Unless you'd rather leave." I didn't answer right away. I sat back in the chair, mug warm in my hands, heart doing a quiet backflip. "Why would you want me to stay?" I asked. Wes leaned back, arms crossed now, but his expression stayed open. "Because I like having you here, and not just in my bed." That made my chest go tight. "You don't even know me," I said. He shrugged. "I know enough. I know the way you laughed when I overcooked the eggs. I know how you freeze when you think you've crossed a line, even when you haven't. I know you're careful with your words, but not guarded. That's rare." I couldn't speak, not yet. So I stood, walked to the window, and stared out into the gray-blue woods. The trees swayed gently, the rain had slowed, everything felt still. I felt Wes step behind me, close. His hands slid around my waist, resting there like they belonged. "You don't have to decide now," he said softly. "But if you stay, I'd like to sleep next to you again tonight." I leaned back into him without thinking, letting his body support mine. "I'd like that too." And I meant it, not just because of the bed, not just because of the sex, but because something was already starting here. Something that didn't feel like a mistake. Something I didn't want to end at checkout. We didn't make any grand decisions that afternoon. There were no talks about the future, no dramatic confessions. Just life unfolding, quietly, moment by moment. We took a walk when the rain let up, following the narrow path behind the cabin that led through the trees, our boots sinking into soft leaves and pine needles. Wes pointed out small things along the way: a wild mushroom patch, a crumbling stone wall, half swallowed by moss, a spot where he said deer sometimes bedded down in the winter. I listened, asked questions. Every once in a while our hands brushed. Once, he reached for mine, just for a few steps, but it felt huge. "You always walk this trail?" I asked. "Only when I need to think," he said, "or when I need to feel like myself again." We didn't talk much more after that, but the silence wasn't awkward. It was warm, shared. Back at the cabin, we made sandwiches and ate them on the porch under a thick wool blanket. Wes leaned his head back against the post, eyes closed, the breeze playing with a few strands of hair that had slipped from his bun. "You know," I said after a long pause, "if I hadn't messed up the booking, I never would have met you." He cracked one eye open and smiled. "I'm starting to think you didn't mess it up." "Are you saying it was fate?" "I'm saying maybe I'm not mad at the universe this week." That made me laugh. He reached over, took my hand, and kissed the back of it. That night we cooked together, chopped garlic and stirred risotto side by side in the tiny kitchen. At one point he came up behind me, slid his arms around my waist, and kissed the back of my neck. I froze, not because I didn't like it, but because it felt so good. I didn't know how to respond. "Sorry," he murmured against my skin. "Habit." "Not one I want you to break," I said, leaning into him. We ate dinner by candlelight. Not because we were trying to be romantic, but because the power blinked out for 20 minutes during the storm, and we just never bothered to flip the lights back on. Afterward, we sat on the couch by the fireplace, a blanket over both our legs, wine glasses in hand. The fire crackled low. Our legs were tangled. His fingers brushed mine over and over until I turned my hand over and laced them together. "I haven't had anyone here like this before," he said. "Like what?" "Like this. Sharing space, talking about things that matter, laughing without having to perform." I looked at him. I didn't think I needed that until I got here. He leaned in and kissed me. Soft, sure, a little slower than usual. When we eventually made it to bed, it wasn't like the first night. We weren't pretending anymore. There was no hesitation, no awkward leg shuffle under the blankets. We just fit. His hands explored again, tender, slow, familiar now. He kissed me with more purpose. And when he slid his hand lower again, this time under both of our briefs, the moment was electric, but not just because of desire, because it felt like home. We made love that night. Not quick, not greedy, just present. Skin to skin, every touch meaning something, every kiss feeling earned. After, as I lay on his chest, listening to the steady thud of his heartbeat, he whispered, "You're still here." And I smiled into his skin and said, "I don't want to be anywhere else." He kissed the top of my head. "Then don't leave tomorrow." I didn't say anything right away, because I was starting to think I wouldn't. I woke the next morning before Wes did. The cabin was still and warm, the scent of last night's fire clinging to the air like a memory that hadn't burned out. Light filtered through the curtains in streaks of gold, and outside birds were calling softly, like they knew not to disturb us too much. Wes was behind me, breathing slow, arm still loosely draped over my waist. His leg was tucked between mine, skin warm and smooth, his hand resting just above the curve of my hip. It felt easy, right, and that scared me, because I knew I was supposed to leave today. I lay there for a while, staring at the ceiling, trying to figure out what the hell I was going to do. My bag was still packed, my plans still technically intact, but my heart wasn't in them anymore. "You're thinking too loud," Wes murmured behind me. I turned to face him. His hair was a mess, eyes half-lidded, voice gravelly from sleep. Beautiful in the kind of way that feels unrepeatable, like catching someone in the middle of being real. "I'm supposed to leave today," I said softly. His hand moved to my chest, resting there with his thumb brushing across the skin like he was calming something. "Do you want to?" I didn't answer. "I'm not asking for forever," he said. "I'm not even asking for a label. I don't want this to end before it's even started." I swallowed. "I don't either." He leaned in, kissed me slow, and said, "Then stay. Just one more night. Let's not rush the goodbye." We made breakfast, slow, quiet, barefoot. Wes flipped pancakes while I leaned against the counter, watching him with this ache in my chest I didn't know how to name. He slid a plate toward me, then pulled me into a kiss that tasted faintly of syrup and something warmer. Later, we lay in front of the fire again, tangled under a blanket, saying nothing. He rested his head on my chest, hand tracing patterns into my side. "You know," I said, "I thought this trip was just about clearing my head." He looked up. "And now?" "Now it feels like I walked into something I didn't even know I was missing." He smiled, soft and a little sad. "Me too." That night we shared the bed again, but it wasn't just about desire. It was slower, more familiar. We touched like we'd done it 100 times, kissed like we had more to say than words allowed, fell asleep with limbs wrapped and breath shared, as if we were trying to memorize what it felt like to be here. Because even if I had to leave, part of me already knew I'd be coming back. The next morning felt different. Not colder, not distant, just quieter. Like the cabin itself knew this might be the last time I'd wake up in this bed with Wes's arm around me and the sound of pine trees rustling outside. He stirred beside me, lips brushing my shoulder as he yawned. "What time is it?" "Almost 10. He let out a breath. "Checkout's at 11. I didn't move, neither did he. Instead, he slid closer, spooning behind me, and held me just a little tighter, like maybe if he pressed close enough, time would pause. His hand grazed across my stomach again, and I covered it with mine. "You could still stay," he said softly. "I know." We lay there in that space between leaving and staying, the kind of pause that stretches far longer in the heart than on the clock. Eventually, I got up and started to gather my things. Slowly, reluctantly. Wes sat on the edge of the bed, watching me with a half smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Do you always fold your clothes like that? Only when I don't want to wrinkle them in the bag? Or when you're stalling?" I looked at him. "Maybe both." He stood, crossed the room, and wrapped his arms around me from behind. His chin rested on my shoulder. "I've never asked anyone to stay before. I've never wanted to." He turned me gently to face him. "So don't go yet. What are you rushing back to?" My mouth opened, then closed. The truth was, nothing urgent. A job that could wait, a city that would still be there, a routine that didn't feel nearly as full as this. He reached for my hand, fingers warm around mine. "Come back," he said, "even if it's not today, even if it's next week or next month. Just don't let this be a one-time thing." I stepped into his arms and kissed him, slow, deep, with that weight behind it. The weight of goodbye and the hope of something more. "I won't let it be." He walked me out to my car, bare feet, on the cold porch, arms folded across his chest. "You'll text me when you get back?" he asked. "I'll text you before I hit the highway." He leaned in and kissed me again, one hand cupping my cheek like he didn't want to forget the shape of it. And then I got in the car and drove away, watching him in the rearview mirror for as long as I could, the cabin shrinking behind me like a dream I'd somehow stepped out of. But I wasn't sad, because something had started here. And something told me it wasn't over. It had been 3 weeks. 3 weeks since I left the cabin. 3 weeks of texts that started cautious, then turned warm, then daily. 3 weeks of voice notes, blurry photos of his dinners, me sending him city sunsets from my rooftop. 3 weeks of knowing something had shifted in me, something I couldn't shake. I hadn't made it through a single night without replaying how he looked, standing barefoot in the cold morning light, asking me to stay. And now I was back. I hadn't told him. I'd booked the cabin properly this time, same listing, same porch. But when I pulled into the driveway just before sunset, I saw the porch lights were already on. The door opened before I even knocked. Wes stood there, holding the frame like he'd been waiting since the day I left. His hair was down, a little longer, and his eyes lit up in that slow, grounding way that made it hard to breathe. "You came back," he said. "You left the light on," I replied. He smiled, wide this time. No hesitation. I stepped into his arms before either of us said another word. His embrace was tighter than before, familiar, like I'd never left. His mouth found mine, and the kiss wasn't slow or polite. It was deep and full of something we hadn't said yet. When we pulled apart, he rested his forehead against mine. "I thought about you every night," he whispered. "I know, I felt it." That evening we cooked together again, laughing this time, stealing kisses between stirs of the pot. We lit candles, drank wine, and didn't pretend anything was casual. Later, in the same bed where it all began, we lay face to face, our hands roaming slowly, not out of hunger, but to remember. "Do you ever think about how weird this all is?" I asked, tracing a line down his chest. "I used to," he said, "but now it feels like the only thing that's made sense in a while." He kissed me, and this time, when his hand slid lower beneath the blanket, I didn't gasp. I sighed, because it wasn't just about touch anymore. It was about coming home. We made love again that night, tender and unhurried. We whispered names into skin. We clung to each other, not because we were afraid to fall, but because we finally felt steady. After I curled into his side, head on his chest, fingers tracing circles over his ribs, he whispered into my hair, "You staying this time?" I smiled. I never really left, and neither did he.